Well, it's good to be here. Many of the faces in this room are familiar to me. I also I feel very honored to be here presenting on this topic for reasons that will be revealed in a moment, which I think will be quite jarring for many of you. I thought, before I started really preparing and researching for this presentation, that this was an issue that so many of us know about, that we would see numbers of sexual harassment in particular really dissipating over time, and it's really not the case. But we're going to uncover why that is as we move through this presentation. I wanted to begin by sharing a story. In the late 1990s, and roughly for 10 years after that, I was a university professor at a liberal arts university right outside of Austin, Texas. It was a very, very innovative school, and one of the things that they allowed me to do was to create a track, a sequence of courses in what we called advanced relationship studies. So all of these courses addressed relationships and the communication that constitutes those relationships. The most popular course as part of that track, in fact, I still hear from students who will say that the most memorable, impactful course that they ever took was one that I called The Dark Side of Relationships. The Dark Side of Relationships was a thematically based course that explored topics that so many of us live through and experience, but we don't talk about them. That course, we covered topics like grief and loss. We talked about what happens when chronic or terminal illness is part of a family or a relational system. We talked about bullying. We talked about addiction. We talked about how to have difficult conversations. A very popular topic was how do you end relationships? Instruction in how to do that. We talked about physical, emotional, and sexual violation. We talked about sexual harassment. The majority of my students were roughly between the age of 18 and 24, and I was repeatedly astounded, semester after semester, as to how many students, both male and female, had several different stories and experiences at their young age of having been sexually harassed. So when I dipped back into the more recent literatures and studies on sexual harassment, I was surprised to see that it is just as pervasive. My goal back then and my goal today is to illuminate and shed light into this darker side of interpersonal interaction through conscious communication, which can create more consciously lived relationships, and really to invite you to use this training as a way of waking up more fully to what sexual harassment is. Part of the reason why it is still so pervasive is that many of us, whether we're the victims of it or the perpetrators of it, are not necessarily aware that that is what is happening. And we'll discuss why that is as we move through the presentation. I invite you to be here with what we call beginner's mind. So if you could just set down, put down all of your previous training in sexual harassment, everything that you already know about policy, procedure, and legalities, and just set that aside. Maybe to take in some new information, some things that you've not thought about before, some things that you've not seen before, and just kind of welcome that in an unbiased, non-judgmental way. And to really take this content and use it, not only in your workplace, but to use it as you're mentoring others, as leaders and managers, and to use it in your own families, in your own personal relationships, so that you become someone who is capable of intervening when sexual harassment is present, that you are capable in your own communication of preventing it, and that you are fully capable of not staying back and being a bystander when it occurs, but that you are capable of stepping up and intervening when necessary, when you observe or have the experience of someone around you experiencing sexual harassment. So what I ask is that you're just open, that you're curious today, and most of all, that you are committed to using the content in today's presentation to help to be a change agent. The final slide of this presentation is sexual harassment does not live here. And that's what we want to do. We want to create an environment here at Sundance Vacation where sexual harassment does not live here. Here is the truth, and this is how this training differs from other trainings you may have received, and this is really important. This can kind of be a game changer in the way that you think about sexual harassment. Above all else, sexual harassment in the workplace is a communicative, relational, and organizational cultural problem, okay? It arises out of our communication. When I harass sexually, that is an act of communication, maybe through my words, through my nonverbal communication, through the way that I inappropriately touch, through gossip, inappropriate comments. It is a communicative phenomenon that affects relationships, interpersonal relationships in the workplace, which then becomes an organizational problem. You might not feel the effects directly of sexual harassment that's occurring in another part of the organization, but over time, if that continues, it's like a contagion. It's like a cancer of sort. It starts to erode the culture of the organization and ultimately will affect the bottom line of the organization. So it arises in communication, which affects our relationships, which then has a cultural impact, meaning the culture of this organization. So that's how it becomes a problem. And it's also how we resolve it. We resolve sexual harassment through our communication. We resolve sexual harassment through interacting in certain ways. We resolve it by creating workplace cultures where everyone feels safe. Does anyone remember from our training on group and team dynamics what the fundamental, absolute foundation is of a team that will thrive? It's one word.
Trust.
Trust. So if I had to just end the presentation right now, that is what I would most want to emphasize, is that episodes of sexual harassment significantly erode, even destroy trust. And if trust is not present in our colleague-to-colleague relationship, if trust is not present in our group and team, if trust is not present in the larger organization, you cannot do your jobs effectively, productively, and there is a very high likelihood that you will leave your position and you will leave the organization. It is that important. So that's where I want to start, at the ground level. Sexual harassment is a communication problem that leads to a relational problem that affects the organization. Sexual harassment is resolved and managed through communication, which impacts relationships in a positive way, which has a positive impact on the organization. So this goes far beyond policies, procedures, legalities. Okay? If I want an uncompromising, zero-tolerance organizational culture, my stance has to be, do you all agree? Do we want that? An uncompromising, zero tolerance for sexual harassment workplace culture. If I want that, I have to be very committed to looking at how I communicate, how I conduct my interpersonal relationships in the organization, and its impact on organizational culture. This cannot happen only at the level you're at. This cannot happen only if you make this commitment as leaders, as managers, as owners of the company. It has to be that you're committed to it, but then you carry that commitment into, or you inspire this commitment into those that you lead and manage. It's got to be pervasive throughout the workplace. So feel free to take some of these materials back into your groups and teams and have your own mini workshops or tutorials on sexual harassment. The truth is, there must come a time when the workplace is such that no one ever has to say #MeToo again, ever. A lot of the reason that I'm here is because of the Me Too movement. And organizations across the country are bringing in people to give more advanced, more in-depth training in sexual harassment that goes beyond policies, procedures, legalities, so that this becomes our reality, that no one will ever have to say, Me Too again. So these are our foundational principles. Sexual harassment is communicated. It's in our communication. Affects relationship, affects the larger workplace culture. But these three words are also the solution to the problem of sexual harassment. Our stories matter. As I mentioned, I opened with the story of working with 18 to 23, 24-year-old students, male and female, who had more than one story of having already experienced sexual harassment. I'm much older, so I have my own repository of stories. Things that have happened to me throughout the course of my life at different ages and stages. Episodes that left me feeling uncomfortable and very, very uncertain as to how I was going to handle it, how I was going to deal with it. So I want to begin by showing you a pretty compelling video. We're probably going to move the chairs a little bit because after we watch the video, I'm going to just put you into maybe small groups of 4 or 5. And I want you to think about how, as you're watching, how does this video make me feel? So these videos, hopefully I'll get through the 3 of them during today's training, come from a nonprofit organization called #That'sHarassment. These videos and the campaign that they grow out of are directly related to the Me Too movement. So there's about 9 of them, 7 to 9 videos. They are so well done. And the actors and actresses that are in these videos, in many cases are top name actors and actresses that volunteered their time. The 3 videos that we'll watch here today are all their whole series of videos are based on real life experiences. Okay, are you ready for the first one? Okay, this one is called The Boss. So bear with me as I get to
Hey, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I can't find the McGinnis file. I keep losing it. I mean, I don't know. Is it me?
No, I don't know. Hold on. Don't be silly. Oh, that's weird.
Right? It keeps disappearing.
Okay, hold on. We're gonna find it. Just give me 1 second.
Starving. Haven't eaten since lunch.
Ah, here it is.
Where?
I'm just gonna drag it to your desktop for now. It was in the damages file. It didn't have its own file like the rest of the families in the lawsuit. But I'm just gonna organize this tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Oh, thanks, my dad.
Oh, really? You're very sweet.
Cute. All right. If you're done, I'm gonna get going.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Where you headed?
No, we're just home.
Well, I'll take you.
Oh my goodness, no, don't be silly.
No, it's no problem. I'm out of here.
No, it's fine. It's
No, I'll drop you.
I'm
It's
4
not-
stops away in the queue. I'm really fine. Yeah.
What, you don't get bothered on the train?
No, I listen. I put in my headphones and I listen to my music, and then
Nice.
yeah, I just go in my own little world. It kind of clears my head. It's nice.
Actually, you know what? That sounds really nice. No, I should probably join you on the train. Clear my head. Get one of those splitters, headphone.
Oh yeah.
So you're happy here? Everything good? You're
Oh
happy
wow,
here?
yeah, for
Everything
sure,
good?
yeah. I've been great.
You're comfortable? Everyone treating you right?
Yeah, everybody's been just great. I feel really lucky to be here.
Good.
So yeah.
Well, I'm really glad we chose you.
Me too.
Even though there was a contingency that were they wanted someone older with more experience. It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
Right?
I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. No, I just want you to know that I really believe in you.
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you what did What?
I'm sorry. I have a boyfriend.
No, that's okay. I'm married. I was just trying to show you how much I appreciate you. I do.
Yeah.
I do. I really do.
I just don't know if I'm kind of comfortable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
No, I don't want to make you uncomfortable.
I
No,
know,
that's not my style.
I know. It's fine. So I'm
No,
gonna
I can
just,
see.
I'm gonna go.
I can see it's not fine. You're not fine. Listen, I want things to be comfortable between us.
No,
okay?
it's okay.
No,
I
I
know,
feel
I
it's
know.
not. I feel it's not okay, and I really am sorry. I want to make it okay.
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 Are we good? Nothing happened.
No.
Nothing
no,
happened.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
I was showing. You know what was? I just want to show you how great you are, how good you are.
Thank you. Okay.
And that's all. Okay. We're good. We're friends. Friends.
We're friends.
Okay.
We're friends.
Come on. Let's have a
I
hug.
don't think that's really.
No,
we don't need to
let's end this properly. Come on. Come on.
Okay.
There and here. This is how we end things properly. Right?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. While I'm bringing us back, if you could just maybe get into small groups of 5, move the chairs around. The best way to really delve into this content of this training is to really get pretty transparent about these situations. Now, what we saw here today might visually seem pretty extreme to us, but there are so many of us here in this room that have had variations of this, maybe something exactly like this, maybe worse. What I want you to talk about in your group, which is take about 5 to 7 minutes for this, is what surprised you about this video? What did you learn, if anything? What did you learn from it? And then, sharing maybe an aspect of your own story. Again, it doesn't have to be as extreme as this, or of someone that you know. And what I'm mostly interested in is, what do you think she did after that? Given the context and the script that we heard, what do you imagine this woman did after this encounter? Okay? Just change your chairs so that they're facing front. Did she report this? What was your consensus in your group?
It depends on how much money she was earning.
But there was really important clues in the script.
She's an attorney or a paralegal, so she probably at least knew her rights.
Was she attorney?
We're paralegal, yeah. They're working on a case.
Oh, okay.
Damages folder.
I missed that part. Yeah, but I think that it's interesting that she makes reference to the fact how grateful she is to have a job because of what? She's gonna have to go live with her parents. Is your general consensus that she didn't report?
Yeah.
Did not. What do you say?
That she did not? Fewer than 2% of us will report. That's a recent finding. What about this video was most evocative for you? Kind of, stirred you up? Maybe made you think about someone that you know who was in a similar kind of situation? Yes.
I'm just shocked when people don't say, "What are you doing?" So when he's sitting on the desk and he's inching toward her, like if I was in that situation, I would just look at the person and go, "What are you doing?" Like, or I'm not bringing it in. I'm like, "How about we don't bring it in? Let's just fist bump." Like I don't understand how people just take it like, "Oh my gosh, I guess I have to be hugged." Like, no, this is my 26-year case. So I guess I was most shocked by that. I mean, I guess it was
Do you feel there was an evolution in your own development that brings you to this place, or do you think, years ago you would have had a similar kind of reaction at the start of your career? Does that have anything to do with it?
No, I've been lucky, I guess, to never have been in a situation where I felt put upon or discriminated against because of my gender in any way. So I haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's easy for me to say I would act that way. I mean, I think I would based on other things I do.
Right.
But I've never been on the receiving end of it.
Yeah.
Hopefully never on the giving.
I saw a hand back there. Anybody? Yes.
Yeah, I've been in the workforce for many, many years, and I would say that at this point in my life, I would respond very differently than I would have 35, 40 years ago. I would have been a lot more like she was. I really don't think I've done much like that. But it would have been a much different response 30 years ago than it would be for me today.
Yeah. I think
Although I can't imagine it.
most of the videos that are part of this series really bring the viewer to this place of this moment of understanding that there's some confusion here about what I should do. And I think that that's why the videos can make many of us as viewers really uncomfortable, because we can see the character grappling with, what do I do here? I don't have a script. I'm not prepared to handle this. When I go back to what I said, these 3 fundamental principles, communication, relationship, and workplace culture, there was something very significant about the way he was communicating with her that set herself up for this. Any reflections on what that was? There was something in particular.
He mentioned there was other candidates for her position prior to hiring her. I think he kind of threw that as like a dig that if
Yeah.
she were to go any further with this, there would be consequences.
Yeah, that's a really important part of the narrative here. I'm really glad you're here, even though, there was some consternation about hiring you. People thought you were too young. First of all, that's inappropriate to reveal that to her. But then it, again, puts her in a position of, wow, not only am I grateful to have this job, but this job might be fragile because there are people here who really didn't want me to be here. So there's a lot going on just in that video, not to mention the others. The most common reactions that will prevent someone from taking action, someone from confronting or exposing the harasser, or from filing a complaint, is a sense of hurt and betrayal. Like, I can't believe you did this. I've been working with you now on and off for 5 years. You're my colleague. I can't believe that you crossed this line. Quid pro quo harassment. You do this for that. In other words, I'm in a real predicament here. If I don't comply, if I don't submit, if I don't agree, what does that mean practically in the context of my own life? A large majority, the study I referenced earlier, of those who are sexually harassed are men and women who are in jobs where they earn $25,000 or less. That need the paycheck, that need the promotion, that need to stay in the role, that need their job. Really feeling afraid about retribution and retaliation. What's going to happen to me if I report this? What are the consequences of it? I'm on the brink of a promotion. I might have to go live with my parents. You know, what will the consequences be for exposing this episode? If I feel threatened, if I feel diminished, wow, he's telling me that I was hired for the position, but there are others who didn't want me here. Who knows if that's true or not? But feeling diminished in my capacities, in my abilities, in my humanity. Feeling guilty or ashamed. What do you think that's about? Feeling guilty or ashamed. Why might I feel like I caused it? Just take this as an example. There were some cues about that in the setting. Did anybody notice?
It was late at night, nobody else was there.
It looked like it was late at night, no one else was there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
She also put herself in his chair, like sat at his desk, you know, instead of just directing him from behind the desk, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, why did you put yourself in that position? Someone might ask. Inappropriately. Why were you wearing that dress? Why did you stay after? I study after study after study that I read in preparation for this training talked about how many episodes of harassment occur at conferences, away from the office, when colleagues or managers, leaders say, why don't you come back to my room? I want to show you something. Or let's have a nightcap or whatever it is. You know, why don't you come back to the room? Why did you go there? In other words, people will ask this question. And so it's like, oh my gosh, did I put myself into, is this my fault? And then, this is a big one. Many of us will not report because we wonder if we will be believed. Who will believe me? I'm brand new to the organization. Who will believe that this leader, this boss, who might be revered in the company, are others going to believe that he or she conducted him or herself in this way? So someone back there said, there is a difference between what we hope she did and what she probably did. So these are just some of the common reasons that reporting doesn't happen. If you yourself, or if you know someone, did anyone have an example, by the way? Or did anyone share an example that occurred with someone else that you're aware of? Do any of you know people who have experienced this but didn't report? They may not have shared with you, right? But these might be some of the reasons, so that when someone does share with us about having been sexually harassed, and we wonder why they didn't take action, expose the harasser, or file a complaint. This is in your handouts. You've got this list to look at. These are the kinds of things that prevent us from doing so, and a way that we can better understand why no action was taken. Silence, secrecy, and shame, the 3 S's, tend to dominate the aftermath of sexually harassing episodes. Oftentimes the person who has been harassed will move into silence, the harassment episode becomes a secret about which they feel quite ashamed. All right, so remember that silence, secrecy, and shame often live in the aftermath. And I will tell you that if I'm employed somewhere and I have endured several episodes of sexual harassment, and I move into silence, secrecy, and shame, I put myself in a position where I likely won't be able to work for the organization for much longer, because these three things, if they are present in your life, in your psyche, start to erode who you are and really affect your capacity to work at a high level. So remember the importance of those three words: silence, secrecy, and shame. 3 out of 4 episodes of sexual harassment are not reported. Again, fear of retaliation, intimidation, fear that I'm not going to get the job, the promotion, be able to stay in my role, fear that I caused it. We went through all of these. Fear that I won't be believed, fear that I will lose my position, I will lose work on this project, I will lose my paycheck, fear that I will lose my reputation. There have been those who have come forth and told their story and filed a complaint and let others know what happened, only to have their reputation completely shattered. So coming forward has a cost, can potentially have a cost, which is, again, one of the reasons why we don't report. In the face of being harassed, many will do the following: remain quiet and just kind of suck it up. This is really interesting. Rather than report, many people will change their path, change their routine, or change their project. I was thinking about earlier this morning the university that I spoke of in my opening. When I first started working there, I had a colleague down the hallway who was a psychology professor. And he was at the university for countless years. He was actually in his 80s. And I was new to the university. I was very, very young in my career, and it felt as though he was taking me under his wing. And for me, he reminded me of my grandfather. I thought nothing of it. What I didn't realize is that I was very, very much being groomed to be sexually harassed. And indeed, there were a couple of episodes that I don't need to share the details about that definitely constituted sexual harassment. I was new to the university. He was a revered scholar and professor. I couldn't fathom going to the provost and reporting this man. I couldn't fathom it. I couldn't fathom what it might mean to my own reputation. And I was young. And academia is not an easy business to be in. So I chose to remain silent. And he really crossed the line on 3 occasions. What did I do instead? I changed my path. I changed my routine. I literally made sure that I was no longer in my office when he was having office hours. I would walk around the building so as not to have to walk past his office so that I could say hello. I started avoiding certain cafes and restaurants that I know that he frequented during his breaks at the university. Many of us will do that rather than confront the harasser, and we're going to talk about that today. Like, well, how do I do that? Confront the harasser or file a complaint. I changed my routine. I changed my path. This is what many of us do. This came through very clearly in the 2019 study. Rather than report, we will do that, or ultimately we will leave the job. We will live in fight, flight, freeze, faint, fawn. Those are what? We learned about this. Those 5 Fs. Those are the stress response. You know, making a decision every day. Okay, I have to do whatever I can to avoid this person. Caused me a lot of stress. So it can put us into fight mode. It can put us into flight. It can put us into freeze, shutdown. in the moment of being in the presence of this person that stepped over that boundary, I can just freeze up. Fawning is the new F. If you remember, I mentioned this. Fawning is, I'm going to do anything and everything that I need to do to sort of just fall all over you, to give you what you most want and need so that I can survive this job. Fawning might mean I submit to the harassment because I need this job to survive, or I need you on my side, whatever it is. And Dan Siegel also talks about fainting. This is one of the most acute states that one can come into during stress response. You can literally faint. So if I have to work in the workplace with someone who is harassing me, I tend to go to work every day. This is where work becomes an unsafe place, where I'm living in stress response. Oftentimes I will suppress or deny. He's 85 years old. Did he hurt me? No, he's harmless. I'm sure he comes from that generation where professors acted like that all the time. It's nothing, right? Or minimize. Again, this is just the way it is. This is just the way he or she is. That's an old day. We're not in that day anymore. The excuse of, that's just how I am. This is how I show my appreciation as the character in that short film. I didn't mean it in the way that you're thinking. It was nothing. It was nothing. I'm so sorry. It'll never happen again. You have that one employee who's inappropriate all the time. And that one employee might be with the organization for a really long period of time. You're just like, oh, don't worry. That's just Dale. Or, oh, don't worry about it. That's just Karen. That's how she is. No, it's a new day. In the worst case scenario, in the face of harassment, some of us will submit. Then we go ever deeper into the silence, the secrecy, and the shame. These are the impacts, and several of them I already highlighted. High levels of anxiety if I've been the victim of sexual harassment. Anxiety and depression are the highest reported impacts of having been sexually harassed. Again, imagine being the victim of it and then always anxious about, is this going to happen again? What am I going to do about this? Really having to grapple with, do I report? Do I file a complaint? And how nerve-wracking that is. How is that going to change things for me? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose the promotion? A lot of anxiety inherent in it. And then depression, especially if I really love my job. Is it possible that I might have to leave this job because of what's going on? If I'm making the decision not to report or not to confront the harasser. Anger, resentment, total lack of trust in that person and potentially in the organization. And this is why owners, executive leaders of an organization are proactively dealing with this phenomenon by bringing in additional training like this, so that there is this sense that we are committed to this organization being one where all employees feel safe. Disengagement from my work and from other people in my organization is an impact. Of course, lack of effectiveness, productivity, my success will be compromised. And then another tragic impact of the presence of sexual harassment is losing your best and your brightest. If you remember from the training in team dynamics, the 5 S's, and I know that some of you took those and went back into your teams and actually started using them. I think you reported about that. I want you to think about these two in the context of sexual harassment. Please remember, and if you weren't part of that training, please know that the 5 S's are absolutely fundamental to having a workplace culture that is not only safe, but that's gonna create the optimal conditions for everyone to work at a really high level. Ultimately, this is what we all wanna know. Am I safe here? This is where we start. Is this a trusting environment? Am I valued here? Am I supported here? Do I feel that I'm a part of this organization? And is this a place where I can succeed? These are just fundamentally key elements that must be in place if an organization is to function at a high level. Think about how all of these things are compromised when sexual harassment is present, when it's allowed, when it's enabled. You are not safe. One does not feel valued if they are the victim of sexual harassment. You may or may not feel supported. I don't feel supportive if I feel that it would be threatening to me or my position if I were to report or even share with a colleague about what happened. I will not necessarily feel part of the organization, especially if the organization claims to have zero tolerance for this kind of behavior, and I will not succeed. I will not succeed if I am the victim of sexual harassment or have been. It costs too much emotionally, physically, professionally. Okay. Why now? I'm just going to go through some of these facts with you before we take our first break. Are you ready for a break?
Yes.
Starting to get that. Okay. So this study, as I mentioned, has the largest study that on sexual harassment ever conducted, most comprehensive, and it was just published in February of 2019. So the findings are very current. I just wanted to share some of the findings with you. Of those studied, and there were over 20,000 people who participated in this study. Of those studied, 81% of women and 43% of men indicated experiencing sexual harassment. Several of them citing examples of sexual harassment that happened within the past 6 months prior to them taking the survey. The most common form of sexual harassment is verbal. Second common form is unwelcomed sexual touch. The third most common form of sexual harassment is cyber harassment, sexual harassment that is occurring online, in emails, in text messages, in online photos, pornography, videos, things like that. And then the fourth form of sexual harassment most commonly experienced is outright sexual assault. The age of one's very first sexual harassment experience for women and men is that age range between 14 and 17 years of age. Okay, so think about that in terms of your own histories, and for those of you who have children in the room. And that in some cases, men and women, boys and girls aged 11 through 13 have their first episode of being sexually harassed but don't know what to call it because they don't know what it is. The average age of women who are most frequently sexually harassed are between 24 and 34 years of age. For men, between 25 and 49 years of age. Most women who experience sexual harassment online are between the ages of 18 and 24. Men, sexual harassment online between the ages of 18 and 49. I don't quite understand these numbers. They're interesting. Again, fewer than 2% of men and women will actually turn to the harasser and name what just happened. Will confront the harasser on their behavior.
I would. In a hot second.
31% of women and 20% of men report anxiety and depression as being the two top most symptoms that are the result of having been sexually harassed. Women, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, disabled, and those who earn $25,000 per year or less are the most vulnerable to sexual harassment. That's a statistic that really shook me up. Sexual harassment most often occurs in public spaces and in the workplace. Those are the two top realms where sexual harassment occurs. In 2007, a woman named Tara Burke coined the Me Too phrase, and she used it all over social media, and her goal was to create a movement where people would come forth and out themselves related to sexual harassment. So that was in 2007. But it was in 2017 where actress Alyssa Milano, after the Harvey Weinstein stuff, put a hashtag in front of Me Too. And when she did that, within 2 days after hashtag Me Too, 45% of Facebook users put hashtag Me Too as their profile page, as their profile photo, the image on their Facebook page. So it spread like fire. Hashtag Me Too spread like fire as a result of that movement coming from Alyssa Milano. All right, so those are just if you're interested in the study, I can certainly provide you the link. It's very comprehensive, but I thought for our purposes, those are the most significant pieces of data. Okay? All right, let's take a break, and we will resume at 3:07. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things for you in your packets. The EEOC statement on sexual harassment is in the packet, should you wonder how they define it. Just a couple of things that I want to point out. We're gonna watch another video and do a similar kind of unpacking of the video. And this comes from some of their language about sexual harassment. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or someone who is not an employee of the employer, such as a client or a customer. We were talking about that, right? You have a really tight team, small team, but you're constantly interacting with outside vendors. So if an outside vendor or customer is harassing one of your team members, it's the responsibility of the company to make sure that that's handled so that that individual can do his or her job. Sexual harassment can also occur, how did we put it? From subordinate to superior? Peer-to-peer, which that's what the next video is about, peer-to-peer, but also employee toward manager, leader, owner of the company. The example you gave was an excellent one. The example of being at a conference and an employee coming up to his or her boss, manager, leader, and saying, here's a key to my hotel room. Those are stories we likely don't hear. We know that it happens, but we may not hear about those. Right, so harassment occurring from that point of view. So we're going to come into a video. This video is called The Coworker. Again, as you're watching, what are you learning from this? What is it teaching you that you didn't know before? Mostly, how does it make you feel? And then we'll have a discussion about it.
Is this your first shift?
Yeah. Have you worked here for a while?
Yeah, man, this is going on my 3rd year.
Cool.
I actually worked here, what, a year and a half before Livia. How did you meet Livia?
Oh, we used to go surfing together.
Really?
Yeah.
Surfing? No
Surfing
shit.
camp.
Surfing camp? It's kind of hot. You and Livia, little bikinis, waves crashing on the shore, trying to keep them up. With all the talk that happens here, believe me, I was being subtle saying that. Because the guys in here, it's a lot. Did Livia kind of give you the rundown?
Yeah. It's not my first time bartending, so.
It's a sausage party in here.
It's fine. I'm very familiar.
Yeah, because you're a sexy girl, Sam.
Thanks.
Welcome. Guys are going to be coming up to you all the time, I can already tell.
Well, I don't know about that.
Oh, yeah. Know about that. They're going to be like, hey, sexy ass you got going on over there. Does that sexy ass have a telephone number I can call?
Oh, God.
I'm serious, and I'm telling you, I'm being subtle. Because some of the guys are way worse than that, and they don't always just use their words, you know what I mean?
No, I know. I mean, it's part of the job. It happens, you know.
Yeah. Because you know guys, they'll be getting drunk, and they think they can have whatever they want. You know, the whole grab 'em by the pussy thing, and then it's like out of nowhere, they're like, boom, right there. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah, no, I get it. You like fully like grab.
I was totally showing you how
fine.
Well, here, look. Let's make things even. Go ahead, grab my
No,
hand.
it's
Grab it. Grab it. I do
no,
squats.
don't be stupid.
It's
It's
gonna
fine.
be fun.
It's totally fine.
All right. Suit yourself.
I don't care.
Okay, cool. Are you sure you don't care?
Yes, seriously.
Because for a second there, you turned around like you were gonna give me literally some feminist rant bullshit. And I'm the biggest feminist there is that I know.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I love women. Sam, are you sure we're cool?
Yeah, no, we're fine.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, good. 'Cause
Totally.
You really seem cool. You seem super cool. And if anybody does grab your ass, they come up in here, just tell them. Seriously, most guys will listen. Just say, dude, hands off. If that guy won't listen, come and get me, and I'll make sure that son of a bitch gets out of here.
Okay, I will.
Yo, what's up, Mo? That's our DJ, Mo. So, last thing,
Yeah.
is that the music, when Momo kicks it into high gear, is gonna get a little bit loud in here. So, your customers are gonna have a hard time hearing you. So you may want to
What?
make sure they don't get too close. And I've seen worse. Seriously, it's fucking crazy. I'm gonna go change the kegs out, okay?
Okay.
Curious about some of the things that came up in your discussion. I didn't really give you any guides to have that discussion, but I was able to overhear some interesting comments about. So just anyone, thoughts? Anything interesting that came up? Any highlights? What?
We don't think she'll record it.
No, you won't report it.
You said it got weird within 2 seconds of the video started.
Why did it get weird?
Because that's when he first started bringing up, hey, this is how it is, this is how things are, and he was kind of showing her, and like, let me show you what happened to her. These are the things that people said.
So he was using
Trying
almost.
to act like your friend, trying to build a relationship, like
Yeah.
a relationship on that level, so we can use that to kind of test the waters to see what she was comfortable with and what she wasn't.
Absolutely. And so this is what we refer to as grooming. You know, he's kind of grooming her into a certain kind of dynamic, and he's able to see how far he can get with her. More. What else came up in your? Yes.
I'm trying to put this into words, but you mentioned earlier how there's that one person that everyone's like, oh, that's just, I think you said Dave, right? And he
Dale.
Dale. You put that into a perspective in this video too. Oh, that's just how it is. That's how it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, take that piece of content, throw it into this video, and they're already utilizing it. That's just how it is. So they all know the environment that is going on, and they're not changing anything with it.
Yeah, and again, but he's using that as an excuse to, hey, whatever it is that I'm doing to you here, you're only gonna experience worse, so I'm gonna just give you a sample of the lowest level of it, but it's way worse once the night gets started.
Definitely doesn't report it.
Hmm?
It's a small bar. It's probably 8, 10 employees. How do you know someone's not remember anything? All right, he starts
Olivia.
off, how do you know
Yeah.
Olivia? Like, maybe I have a relationship with Olivia that she doesn't know about. Olivia's probably the only person they can report to. There's no HR department.
Right,
So she definitely just doesn't report it.
you get that sense. And again, all of these videos always have that moment where you see her at the end. And I think that that's why the black screen comes up and says, that's harassment, where she's like, did I just get harassed here?
Were you supposed to hear what, was he talking to her in her ear, or what was he doing? Like, were you supposed to hear what was going on?
When you see it in better light, he actually bites her ear.
Oh.
He's kind of whispering and he either bites or licks her ear. Yeah, yeah, it's bad. So what do you think about, look, this is a video where we can imagine the opposite happening. We could imagine the female bartender harassing the young male bartender. Someone had asked, in this series of videos, is there a video that displays that? And the answer is no, but that's not because it doesn't happen. And one of the things we know about harassment that occurs with men is that it's very underreported. So even the numbers we have are not entirely accurate because of all of those individuals, male, female, who are just deciding not to report, share their stories. But what's important about the video is knowing that sexual harassment can occur peer-to-peer, coworker to coworker. And we are in that, again, that moment, that sticky dilemma. Can we bring the lights up? Thank you. So, I wanted to get very specific with you on some behaviors, some ways of communicating that are harassing. And as you hear these, maybe just jot down one or two that really just sort of grabbed you, okay? This is part of the reason why sexual harassment is tricky territory for us, because we don't always know whether it constitutes harassment or not. Looking at or commenting on another person's body in a way that makes that person feel uncomfortable. There's a difference between saying, for example, nice dress, and saying, wow, that dress really shows off your curves. If your target is uncomfortable or resistant, stop. I would recommend just don't do that. Okay? Unwanted and repeated compliments can constitute sexual harassment. Violating another person's space without their permission. Do not stand too close. Do not touch, and keep your hands to yourself. For your own information, I thought that this would be helpful. This is your tutorial on proxemics, and this is real. This comes from the work of Edward Hall, and although it was published in 1966, it remains true. This is the way that we as human beings in this country deal with space. When you were a child, it was probably referred to as what? Does anyone remember?
Personal space.
Personal space, or the bubble, the space bubble, right? There's the intimate space, then there's this personal space, 1.5 feet roughly. 4 feet is social space. 12 feet is what we define as public space. Now, where do we fit in? Where is a workplace generally experienced, safely experienced? In social space. There are further breakdowns of this, by the way, if you're interested. So, in some of these videos, one of the clues, before you know about proxemics, but you probably picked up on it, one of the clues that a line was being crossed into harassment is that you begin to see the harasser has completely invaded space, has moved out of social space and into personal space. You'll notice in the one that we just watched, how many times he was behind her, brushing up against her. In the first video, getting way too close to her. There are a couple of areas in that scene where he has moved out of personal space, or moved out of social space and into personal space. Now that said, there are these general guidelines. These, by the way, differ culturally. So we have to also keep this in mind. You know, if we have members on our team that were socialized in different cultures, their ideas about personal space can be different. Their ideas about physical affection, the expression of affection, can be very different than ours are. So if I were leading this training in a different country, I'd be talking about some different things. But this is really important for you to take into account so that when you have that moment where you're feeling really uncomfortable and you're not sure why, you can ask yourself, has this person just violated my space? Have they stepped out of public space and into social space? Have they stepped out of social space and into personal space? Have they stepped into intimate space? Now, there are certain people in our life that we allow into intimate space. You know, our children, people we're very close to, our intimate significant other. Very few individuals in your life have access to intimate space. So be careful about that. Don't violate space. Refrain from talking about your own sexual experiences or the sexual experiences of others. Refrain from, this is very explicit, refrain from telling another person that what they need to do is to get laid or lucky, or that they need to relax in order to get laid or to get lucky. Okay. Telling another person what guys like on a date, what women like on a date, referring to body parts and physical traits. Do not do this ever. Telling another person you need to smile more in order to get further. We often see this with women. Why aren't you smiling? You need to smile more. As if the smile is going to open doors to not other aspects of who you are. If an individual is not interested in your advances, if they ask you to stop, if they say no, if they are visibly uncomfortable or shaken by your advances, back off immediately. This is that coworker who's constantly asking you to go out on a date. Or a client or a customer who's constantly asking you to go out on a date or spend time together, and they just don't take no for an answer. That's harassment. Let's see. These are issues that are less constitute sexual harassment. They are harassing in nature, and they are also discriminatory. For example, asking a female colleague who is in the room to undertake tasks that are demeaning to her position. For example, asking a female colleague at a meeting to be the one to fetch coffee, to make copies, or to be the note taker. These are what are called microaggressions. These are very subtle aggressions that are detrimental and hurtful to a colleague in the workplace. Calling female colleagues girl, honey, babe, anything other than her name, requested name, is not appropriate. and this would be true, I would not use the same kinds of what we might call terms of endearment for a male colleague either. Making degrading comments about female or male colleagues in front of other people. Ignoring or dismissing, especially female colleagues, when they are making a contribution in a group setting. Microaggressions. Off-color jokes can be sexually harassing. Sexually explicit language, sexual innuendos, whether you whisper them, send them in an email, tweet, message, or in a text message. Whistling, making sounds, anything in which you are objectifying another person's presence or body. I was astounded by the number of reports that came through in the report that I shared with you that indicated how prevalent exposing oneself is as a form of sexual harassment. That happens in the workplace. Gazing. This happened to me just the other day. I was a customer in a local AT&T store. Gazing, that moment when a person is looked at up and down with their body. And I think because I was thinking about this training, I thought to myself, wow, I really felt that moment. And there was a time in my life where that happened a lot, and I just sort of cast it off as, oh, that's just what happens. I'm a woman, that's just what happens. No. We are in a new day and a new time. It is not appropriate. So beware, not just looking at someone up and down, but maintaining gaze, staring at another person, following a colleague in the workplace can be constituted as harassment. So it's not just what you say. Be very, very careful about what you're doing. Touching of any kind, no forced hugs. Trying to have a colleague meet you alone outside of work for purposes that you would not share with your partner, boss, or your mother. If you're traveling, asking a colleague to meet you alone in your hotel room. I've attended enough academic conferences to know that this goes on all the time. And individuals who go to conferences that will say things like, what happens here stays here, like the Vegas rule. Okay. To be very, very cautious about that kind of behavior. Telling a colleague what they ought to wear to a meeting, to a conference, as if their attire is somehow going to make an impact on the outcome of that meeting or conference. Be very, very careful about making comments about attire. Rating coworkers on a hot scale from 1 to 10. This happens. Allowing your clients to flirt or engage in inappropriate behaviors with your employees. Sending colleagues inappropriate emails, text messages, social media messages, or posts. So what if I'm overhearing a conversation, there's a small group of colleagues who are looking at an inappropriate text message or video or photograph, and I overhear it. Is that harassment?
Sure.
Why?
It depends you. It depends you.
Yeah. So my merely overhearing it can be offensive. So one of the things legally that constitutes, sexual harassment that can be taken all the way in terms of filing a legal complaint is whether or not the harassment has created a hostile work environment or a work environment that feels really uncomfortable to be in. So we need to be very aware of that, those kinds of behaviors. Let's see. Oh, leaving. I thought this was interesting. Leaving an unsuspecting colleague or employee with another colleague who, based on comments he or she has made, makes you know or makes you feel that that person is interested in a relationship with that person. So if I know that someone has a high potential for harassing one of my colleagues, I don't leave that person alone with that person. So part of this is making a decision that you're not going to be a bystander to sexual harassment. Forcing or instigating kisses or hugs between colleagues or between a colleague and a client. How do we handle hugs?
We don't hug.
You don't hug?
It's really weird.
Is that a decision though that you made here? Is that a,
Yeah, it's like a professional decision, I'm probably not gonna hug.
no, is it a professional decision here in this organization or one that you made yourself?
Oh, that's just me.
Okay.
Raise your hand if you hug.
I think it depends on the situation
Tell me.
and your relationship with that person. Like if Lisa is having a bad day
Yeah.
and she's I work with her every day, you know, day in, day out, and she's having a bad day and like I might say, do you need a hug? You know what I mean? And she's like, not like, yeah. I think it depends on the situation. Now, somebody I don't, yeah.
The answer you're looking for is ask. Ask, can I hug you?
Well, I think what was really interesting is what she just said, which is if she thinks that is it Lisa, is having a bad day, you go to her and say, hey, you look like you need a hug. Do you need a hug? You asked. You don't just launch in with the hug. But the asking is really important. And it might seem strange to us to have to ask, because there may have been a time where we all felt more comfortable about hugging, but it's really important that you ask. I know that, sort of a positive sign that some things are starting to shift is in the last maybe 3 to 5 years or so, my being asked that. Can I hug you? And I appreciate that. Because I can say yes and I can say no. Now there are some people who will say, just don't do it. Because what happens if I ask?
Someone might feel obligated to hug you if you ask them, right?
I might not have the courage to say no. But that's where we're going with this next. Because we all need to have the courage to say no, if that's how we really feel. So what is the general rule in this organization, an unstated rule about hugging? Is there one? I just wondered if there was one.
Find out right now.
Sometimes when we give out, awards, and I've learned over the years, not to do the launch, but the person you're giving the award to is so excited they do the launch, so you just go.
Yeah.
In
addition to being highly astute and aware of the verbal communication that comes up at us from others, we are also incredibly wise about nonverbal communication. In fact, we know that as human beings, we pay attention to about only 7% of what is actually said. And the majority of our attention goes to how it is said and the way in which the body is communicating. Most of us, if we're paying attention, if we're very conscious and aware, have a sense of whether or not we can hug someone. If we're really paying attention, and that's really part of what I want to convey here, is really start waking up to the communication you're receiving to others, from others, what their bodies are saying, what their nonverbals are communicating. To also be your guide as to what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. But there are some organizations where hugging was part of the culture, but have since decided it's not going to be anymore. Because it's just you run a high risk of creating that sense of being offended. You run a high risk of making a colleague feel uncomfortable. So I want to bring you into what is called the Plan A. And again, the Plan A, or the notion of Plan A, really comes out of the Me Too movement, because what it is calling us to do, if we know that sexual harassment is pervasive, if we know that it's happening all the time despite everything we know about it and its negative implications, if we know that most people go silent in the face of it, we want to start talking about what do we do or what can we do in the moment of it occurring. Because we don't always have to rush to exposure of the harasser. We don't always have to rush to HR. We don't always have to rush to filing with the EEOC. Our Plan A is to always confront the harasser. How do we do that? What words do we speak? How do we convey our message non-verbally? That's our Plan A. And if Plan A doesn't work, then we move to Plan B. So a lot of people won't report because they think that their only option is the Plan B. So what is Plan A? In the moment of experiencing harassment, just before I get to the sort of what the steps are, your Plan A, because this is important, is going to be responsive. It's going to come out of a responsive frame of mind as opposed to reactive. And this is why I'm introducing the notion of the Plan A, because I want you to have it as a plan. I want you to have it as a tool should you ever find yourself in this predicament, so that you can responsively deal with harassment as opposed to being really reactive about it. If I prepare with the Plan A, I can override the stress response. So I'm not completely in fight, flee, freeze, fawn, fainting mode. I can override it. It really diminishes, you'll see here by the language of it, that having a Plan A can help you to diminish defensiveness coming from the harasser. Because if the harasser gets really defensive in how you're communicating with him or her about being harassed, they're not going to hear you. Your best chance of having them actually hear you is to communicate with them in such a way that they don't get defensive. This will also give you a sense of control and proactivity. And having a Plan A integrated into the culture here is a really great stance for Sundance Vacation as an organizational culture. To know that everyone who works here understands what Plan A is. So this is how Plan A looks. Step one, taking your stand. So you have this episode where you're being sexually harassed. Step one is taking a stance. And so the recommendation is in the moment, is in your own posture, taking a stance that says no before you even say no. It might mean getting up. It might mean establishing distance from the harasser. It means making and sustaining eye contact. So what we want to do is we want to come into non-verbally a powerful place. This comes from the work of Amy Cuddy, who wrote a book called Presence. I may have referenced her work in some of the other trainings. Amy Cuddy is a social psychologist who studied the impact that our posture, our gestures, our nonverbal communication has on changing not only our sense of power, but the way that other people perceive us and experience us. And she came up with a number of what she calls high power poses. And she's done a lot of research on the changes that happen chemically, hormonally, and neurologically when you spend about 2 minutes in any one of the power poses. So if anyone sees you in these poses in your office and asks you what you're doing, you can just tell them you're practicing. So you can see that there's 3 things that are really common about these poses, the power poses. You can see that there is an openness, there is a strength, and there is a sense of calm. Now think about that. Think about walking around in your life from a position, from a stance, whether you're seated or standing, where you feel calm, really strong, and open, not undefended. So the quintessential power pose, that is a kind of a summary of all of these, is who stood like this?
Superman.
Superman and Wonder Woman. She actually calls this the Wonder Woman stance. Now you notice that the feet are not together. The feet are not together because my platform with my feet together is very small, and it affects my balance. So I don't necessarily feel that I'm in a place of power if I'm standing with my feet together. Feet hip width or slightly wider gives me a very firm foundation. Now, I do not recommend running around like this in your life. However, in the moment of experiencing harassment, I can begin to use my body as my first resource for no, before I even speak the words. Now, the other reason that I wanted to share these with you is that, and I'm going to take you through an exercise in a moment that you've already done before, but you may have forgotten about it. I think these are in your packet. Is this in your packet, this image?
No. Yeah.
It's not?
The images are online.
The image is not? No. I thought it was. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to get it to you. But if you really feel like, you know what, I could use a good infusion of some strength and some calm and some openness happening all at the same time, because this is a really great way to navigate your world, your life, your daily life. I'm going to practice some of these, whether it's just standing, just taking a moment and just standing or sitting in one of these poses, and set a timer. Set a timer and be in that position, that posture, for 45 seconds to 2 minutes. And you start to create a different kind of chemical composition, again, hormonally, neurologically, and chemically in the brain. As you might imagine, these are the less powerful stances. Here's what you need to remember. The majority of us navigate from this place of lack of strength. Look around. Start looking around at the posture of others. Unknowingly, we are assuming these postures. I just read an article yesterday about what's called eye hunch and text neck. It's frightening. Eye hunch. Eye hunch is a natural rolling forward of the shoulders, a postural issue that is happening at the top of the back that's bringing our weight forward. The size or the weight of the average human head is 8 to 12 pounds. If because you are hunching over your device or at your desk hunched over your computer or whatever it is, it should not be surprising to you that you're developing eye hunch. The problem with eye hunch is if it becomes part of not just how you're working, but it's spilling over into other areas of your life, it's a part of your posture now. You do not convey that sense of openness. Not to mention what it's doing to your heart, your respiratory system, all this weight coming forward, your internal organs, your digestive system, and so people wonder, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm getting up from my desk and I'm wondering why I'm so bloated. All this weight on my organs, nothing is free to work as it should, especially my digestive system. Look around. Look around at your colleagues, look around at your kids. And they're predicting that this is going to become a mutation of sorts in the human body. Text neck. Our necks, down and forward. We are not meant to live with our necks down and forward. Cervical vertebrae in our neck. They hold up our head, these cervical vertebrae. They are holding up 8 to 12 pounds. So what happens when I'm holding up 8 to 12 pounds and I'm teetering forward? Tremendous stress on my upper back, shoulders, that area between the shoulder blades that can get really tight. And they're also suggesting that chronic headaches, migraine headaches, tension headaches are also the result of that kind of positioning of the neck. So there are a couple of important things to know about what I just shared with you, which is the way in which our physical bodies are changing because of the work that we do and because of our devices. So one of the things that Amy Cuddy recommends is, let's say you're standing in line, you're at a meeting, rather than being on your device this way, stand up, hold your device away from you. It's very different. It's a different energy. Similarly, when you're sitting, be aware, what is my posture like? When I'm sitting, when I'm standing, in reference to my device, in reference to my computer, and how is that conveying an energy of strength or an energy of vulnerability? So step one is taking your stand in your own body. Get yourself into a position of power in terms of your own posture. Why do I want eye contact to be part of this? I'm strong in my posture.
Eyes down is submissive, isn't it? Eyes down is submissive.
Yeah, eyes down, submissive. But as someone who, you're harassing me and I'm going to look you straight in the eye. I'm confronting. I'm serious. And you know what? You're not going to expect that. Chances are the harasser is not going to expect that of me. And honestly, it's also a way of honoring my own dignity. That in this moment of this happening, I'm going to look this person in the eye. I'm going to take a stance as I come into step two. Step two is tone. What tone am I going to use to communicate the message? I want to speak calmly, firmly, assertively, not aggressively. If my stance is aggressive as opposed to assertive, and my tone is aggressive as opposed to assertive, if I come at you with an aggressive stance and an aggressive voice, how are you likely to react? Aggressively. So I want to be aware of that. Again, I mentioned this. If the harasser goes into stress response, they're not going to hear you. You want to remain calm and confident. I said channel your inner warrior because I didn't know how else to put this, but what you want to do is you want to think about perhaps someone in your life who you just derive a lot of strength from. Someone in your life that is sort of like, I'm calling in that energy. And that's how I'm going to deal with this person, if you need to do that. Step 3 is communicate. This is really important. So now I've got my stance, I've got my tone, and now I'm going to speak the words. Tell the violator, the harasser, to stop his or her behavior, but name the behavior clearly and directly. It's really important that you name what it is that you want to stop. And not be afraid to do that. Do not be vague. So we begin with what? Stance. We want to be attentive to next. Tone. Now we want to speak the words. Here are some examples. Hey, this is not cool. Please stop. The comments that you're making about Amanda are demeaning and inappropriate. So in this moment, I'm feeling uncomfortable in a situation related to communication that feels harassing to me. And I'm going to speak up. I'm overhearing a conversation about, my colleagues are talking about Amanda. Hey, not cool. Please stop. The comments that you're making about Amanda are demeaning and they're inappropriate. Stop touching me like that. It's violating and it's uncomfortable. I have repeatedly said no to your invitations to dinner. Please don't ask me again. It makes me feel uncomfortable and not heard. So there's 3 things happening in this messaging. Stop. Identifying the behavior. Stop asking me to go out with you and how it makes me feel. That's the messaging. I want to give you an example. We'll use hugging as an example. So I'm uncomfortable with the hugging. I want to confront the harasser. Please stop hugging me when you see me. It makes me uncomfortable and it feels inappropriate. So I'm telling you to stop. I'm naming the behavior I want you to stop. I'm telling you how it feels. Your response is, oh, come on, are you serious? It's innocent. I'm a really touchy person and I really like and I appreciate you, that's all. So what do I know by that response?
You want to dismiss what you said.
Yeah, validating. They didn't hear me. They want to dismiss, minimize what I said, invalidate, excuse away. It's just how I show my appreciation. I don't stop. I've already asked you to stop. I've named the behavior. I told you how it makes me feel. You come back with this. So, and I'm going to take it to one more level, which is, okay, I hear you. And I want you to know that hugging makes me uncomfortable. And I appreciate that you appreciate me. So let's talk about other ways you might communicate that. Maybe it's, you just tell me how much you appreciate me. So for individuals who might say, but this is just how I am, this is why I'm doing this. You know, for example, in the first video that we watched, I want to show my appreciation by kissing you. Now, that's a situation where that kiss was unwelcomed, that actually could have fallen into the category of assault. I'm not sure how well the script would have worked in that scenario. But the fact that she said nothing, and we don't know what she ended up doing, but the fact that she didn't say anything, I think she said it made me uncomfortable, right? But didn't follow the protocol. She leaves herself open for the possibility of something like that happening again, or of the harasser trying again. So, just as a review of step 3, the messaging, say stop, clearly indicate the communication or behavior you want to stop, state how it makes you feel, repeat the request if necessary, and if you need to, indicate what you need or what you imagine might be a substitute for that behavior. Like, let's talk about how you can better appreciate me. Let's take another break and come back at 4:12. A little side note, just a tip about the hugging, something to keep in mind. Really become aware of the nonverbal indicators that somebody's coming in for the hug. And you likely know that the general rule is, if I see you and you're like getting ready to give me the hug and I don't want the hug, the general rule is, it's so good to see you. Right? It is oftentimes the extension of the hand is a nonverbal cue that I don't want the hug. If you are completely asleep, meaning unconscious to my nonverbals, you're not going to see that. And then I might have to step back. This just reminded me of a professor I once had who was notorious for making and sustaining eye contact. So he would make and sustain eye contact for very long periods of time. Making and sustaining eye contact for long periods of time is violating. Did you know that? It's violating unless we're really close. But that was really inappropriate. So if you saw this professor at a gathering, I'll never forget this because it happened to me. He would make and sustain eye contact. He would violate personal space. He would get very close to you and he would be talking to you, making and sustaining eye contact, and inevitably, you, the recipient of that, would start moving backwards. And I would move backwards until I was against a wall. You know that phrase, backed up against a wall? That's harassment. So be aware of the nonverbal cues that the hug is coming. If you don't want it, extend the hand. You can also back away. In a professional environment, we want to, if we're going to hug, we want to always enact what's called the A-frame hug. What's the A-frame hug? You know what that means?
What's up?
Yeah. It's the weird, awkward office hug.
Yeah.
Who said what's up?
But no, I said butts out. Yeah. Right? Like butts out?
Yeah. And why is that?
Contact?
Yeah. The A-frame hug only is upper body contact. There's no body-to-body contact. In other words, there's no genital contact. If this is happening, you've way violated in a professional environment. How long should the A-frame hug last?
Half a second. Yeah.
Not long. About half a second. Like, hey, good to see you. If it lasts longer, or if you're in the embrace and they're not letting go, right? You're on that precipice of inappropriate. I forgot about the A-frame hug. In my own history teaching about the A-frame hug, when I have led workshops and seminars in that were designed for couples who had drifted apart and were hoping to sort of reignite intimacy. Many of them, that's how they hugged. They hugged the A-frame hug. That's like, and it's always, there's this really incredible book by William Charnock called Passionate Marriage. And he talks about that being an indicator of a marriage that's potentially in trouble, the A-frame hugs. Hey, hi, good to see you. Right. And he has a whole chapter on hugging, and part of what he recommends as a remedy, as one of many remedies toward reestablishing connection and intimacy, is the non-A-frame hug, which is full frontal contact for at least 45 seconds. Now, when couples that have heard this are in the room and hear this, you can see their faces like, what? But it takes about 45 seconds for that oxytocin to get generated again, to get stimulated. And when the oxytocin is present, if you remember from something we're going to do now that we've done before, when the oxytocin gets stimulated, it really helps us to come into that undefended stance, where we're open to connection. But we don't want that in the workplace environment. We want that A-frame. So watch for the nonverbal cues, adjust accordingly, A-frame only, and only for a couple of seconds. Really important. So the power stance, we're going to come into that now. I'm going to give you another tutorial in it. Some of you have already experienced this, not only in the 8-lesson signature series, if you went through the 8-lesson Studio B signature series, but I think I also talked about it in the emotional intelligence workshop for those of you who were part of that. So we're also going to use this as a nice sort of quieting, standing meditative experience. So I'd like for you to just put everything down and stand. And if we have lots of room, so if you feel like you're too constrained, go to a different part of the room. Some of you will remember this. It's a good thing to remember. It's a game changer. So the first thing we're going to do is take the feet hip width apart. Now, if you know that you could really use or need, even a more powerful stance, you can even take them wider than hip width apart. That's up to you. We're going to use this very therapeutically today. And if you can or desire to, I'd like for you to close your eyes. If that's uncomfortable, just keep your gaze sort of forward and down so that it's just steady and maybe just focused on one thing. So the feet are nice and grounded into the floor. The next thing I want to take your awareness to is your spine. And I want you to just sort of feel and experience the spine as being really tall, maybe uplifted, so you might stand up a little bit straighter, so that you feel that you have the support of your back. You've got your own back. The arms are long at your sides, shoulders down and back. Good. So the feet are rooted into the floor. Spine is tall and straight. Shoulders are down and back. And I just want you to notice the breath just as it is. And I want you to know that right now, your posture is perfect. And I want you to also relax without changing anything, just sort of relax into it. This is known as center, ground, expand. And it is a way that we embody and express power from a place of calm and openness. Take a deep breath in and exhale. And whenever you're ready, open your eyes and have a seat. So, within 45 seconds to 2 minutes of coming into that posture, 3 things happened. Do you remember this? With the centered spine. And by centered, I mean we really feel that we're bringing it back into center and that we feel really dignified in it. Like my spine is supporting me. There's none of this, right? Feet grounded into the floor, my shoulders down and back. When the spine comes into a state of being centered, we tell the brain, hey, it's okay to turn down that production of cortisol. I'm coming out of stress response. I don't need to be in a stress state. So the mere act, you know when we say to people, straighten up your spine, the act of doing that or stand tall has a calming impact. Feet hip width apart, that gives you that sense of stability, is actually related to bringing up just a little bit, and men and women just bringing up just a little bit testosterone, which gives us that sense of confidence, of esteem, of feeling dignified. Shoulders down and back, just like in the non-A-frame hug, starts to very naturally stimulate the production of oxytocin. And if you remember, oxytocin is that hormone that runs highest in the body of a woman who's just given birth and holds her baby for the first time. It runs highest in the body of a man who holds his child for the first time because of the bonding instinct. If you're around, I just received a text message from a friend of mine who he and his wife just had delivered a baby last night. And he said, I am so in love. I cannot believe the love I feel. And I didn't say this, but I wanted to write back, it's all hormones. That's oxytocin, buddy. It is. The baby is producing oxytocin because the baby needs to bond to survive. Baby, they just know this intuitively, and so do we. Oxytocin runs highest in the body of 2 people who are falling in love. If you've ever been around 2 people who are falling in love and you're thinking, oh God. Now you can sit back and say, that's oxytocin. May it continue. When oxytocin is present, it doesn't have to be in matters of love, but when oxytocin is present and it's being produced because the shoulders are down and back, I become more open just naturally. So if you've come into my office with a meeting, we're going to have a meeting together, and I know that there's a strong possibility that there's conflict. And it can go one of 2 ways. We're either going to very productively work through the conflict, or we're going to fight it out. If you come into my office and I am centered through my spine, grounded through my feet, and open, through the shoulders and the chest. The mere act that I'm in this position has the potential to change your energy. Because given this situation I just described, there's every possibility that I'd be waiting for you in my office like this. This is very different. If you came in and we need to work something out, this is a very different posture than. This is important when you're working. And I don't think, is there anyone in here that will be in the sales training tomorrow morning? Because we'll talk about the role that body language plays in sales. But I am far more likely to sign up for whatever you're offering when you are in a position of your own strength, your own calm, and your own openness. So, additionally, one of the reasons that we use this as a meditative micro-practice is because just coming into that position for brief periods of time throughout the day just has the potential to get you out of that stress response. And if you practice it enough, it just becomes part of who you are. And you'll find that you're practicing center, ground, expand in all of your affairs. It's just sort of how you're moving through the world. My own experience of it was very compelling when I walked into a workshop. I was at a leadership workshop, and the session I hoped to attend was full. And so I just walked across the hall and came into the other workshop. I didn't even know what it was called. And you may have remembered my telling the story because I think I've told it here before, but I was watching someone introduce the presenter. I didn't know who the presenter was, but there was a woman who was standing close to the stage, and she was in this position. She was clearly centered and dignified through the spine, grounded through her feet, and just completely open. And that's what the entire session was about. It was about when we change our bodies, we can change the brain, the way that we think, which is going to change the words that come out of our mouth. So how does this relate to this training? Be aware of your stance and what it's communicating. Be aware of your tone. Be aware of the words that you're going to speak if you are confronting or having a conversation with someone who's just harassed you as your plan A action step. Let it come from you as someone who is in this state of feeling strong, calm, and open. I don't want to fight you. Maybe I'm going to have to, I don't know. But I don't want to fight you. I want you to know that what just transpired made me really uncomfortable, was inappropriate, and that there are going to be issues if that happens again. You see? And you can do that from a standing position or a seated position. So it's really valuable. It's valuable in a leadership role. It's valuable when you find yourself in a situation where you have to give a presentation. It's valuable in one-on-one interaction. It's very valuable when you have to have a difficult conversation, because maybe the conversation I have to have about harassment is with a colleague that I've been working with for a long time. And I feel really kind of hurt and betrayed about what's happened between us. So the advice for sexual harassment in the workplace presently is always have a plan A, not just for yourself, but organizationally speaking. If this entire organization were introduced to the notion of a plan A, we would have a much better time helping to strengthen an already positive and strong corporate culture here. I know it is, because I've been here so many times already. There are so many things here that are right about corporate culture. But we want to get to the point where sexual harassment is not here at all. It doesn't live here. Okay. Your plan B, first of all, always remember, I might, come into my stance with my tone, tell you to stop, tell you what made me uncomfortable. I might do that, and I might get what I call blowback to the message. And the blowback can sound something like, oh, you were so sensitive, or, I didn't mean anything by this, or, ugh, are you one of those Me Too people? It's just who I am, it's really not a big deal, some of the responses that we saw in the video. At that point, you want to repeat your request. I want to repeat my request, because if you're coming back with me with blowback, you did not hear me. You didn't hear me. So I want you to use the protocol, the Plan A protocol, as a form of intervention, should these things happen, as a form of prevention. Go back to your offices and train your teams in this protocol. As a form of suspension, I never want to see that behavior again. And also as a form of education, because sometimes it is true that the person I confront did not know that their behavior was a form of harassment. They didn't know. Oh, additionally, for your own benefit, I would document. If something has happened and I took you through Plan A, when I go back to my desk, I want to document, this is what happened, this is the place it happened in, and this was the violation that occurred. This is what I told the harasser. This is how they responded. Make a copy and tell a colleague. Move on.
When you're telling the colleague, you're not necessarily reporting it. You're just,
No.
right?
Hey, I
So
want to
that's
let.
non-reporting.
Yeah.
Isn't it, right there?
I want to let you know that this just happened with Dale. This is what I said to him. Just want you to know. So the proactivity occurs at the first level, which is confronting the harasser yourself. And this is where the bravery and the courage comes in. Am I willing to have this difficult, uncomfortable conversation? Now, if it is something that is assaultive in nature, if it's something that, you feel unsafe having that conversation, you just need to leave the situation, you will know whether or not you're going to be able to, or whether it's appropriate for you to have a Plan A. But we all need to have a Plan A. Move to Plan B when the behavior is not corrected, despite your request to stop. Move on to Plan B if you know that what's happened was intended to cause you harm and distress, if it feels threatening to you, if it affects your productivity, if it's created for you a hostile work environment, and if it involves assault. Your Plan B is Tommy. Familiarize yourself with the sexual harassment policy that's part of this organization. What is the protocol? And these are things that I'm not here to teach you that. These are things I'm assuming you know, right? And at what point in your time here are these things made known?
Sunday,
Day one.
Onboarding.
Yeah.
And is there reminders of it, or is it?
You get the company handbook with the policy.
Okay. And then are there other reminders throughout the years, or? Okay, good. Any other trainings? Okay. So, but you all have the handbook. You know where the policy is. You might want to familiarize yourself with the EEOC policy and procedures for filing a complaint. You want to file your handbook, you want to file the policies and procedures here in a place where you know you can easily access them. Do you know where your handbook is?
His office.
And this is just, we know that this is organizationally, policies, procedures, legalities need to be part of onboarding, which we know is true here. Going back to the foundation of the 5 S's. You know, I never imagined, I make reference to the 5 S's in a lot of the trainings that I do, but I never imagined using them in a training on sexual harassment, but they work beautifully here. And that is really whether you're the one who's been harassed, or you've witnessed harassment, or you perhaps wonder if you have participated in harassment, is asking these questions. Am I safe? Is this other person safe here? Is this a safe place? This organization, am I valued? Is there support here? Are we part of this organization? And can I succeed? Can this person succeed? One of the things we know more about is the prevalence of the bystander. And it's so important that we have bystander awareness. So many of us have been a bystander. Usually, if you are a bystander, you have witnessed or you have heard something, and the first indicator that you're a bystander of something that was inappropriate is you feel very deeply in your gut something is wrong about this exchange here. It's making me uncomfortable. You know that intervention is needed. But you also start to weigh the cost of intervening. Bystanders will do this. How much is it going to cost me if I intervene on behalf of the person being harassed? What happens if I intervene and the person being harassed isn't supportive of my intervention? What happens, what things do I need to fear losing if I intervene? When you are a bystander, you have to know if you choose not to intervene, you have to know that you are enabling the very problem that you feel troubled by. So where I stand on intervention is making a decision here today as to whether or not you're willing to do that. Making a decision organizationally where it's decided that if I'm part of this organization, I am committing to not be a bystander. I am committing to intervening if I have witnessed, and that it is safe for me to intervene, that there won't be retribution or retaliation, especially on the part of the organization, if I speak up. So it really requires a commitment within yourself, a commitment to your colleagues, and a commitment to the organization. This fuels trust. You spend so much of your life here working. If the environment feels hostile, if it feels like it is not a safe place, if it feels like you can't count on others to support you, you will never do your best work. You will never come into the kind of success and the productivity that you so rightly deserve. Okay. I love this phrase. Many of you have probably heard this before in reference to what Mr. Rogers used to say when he was asked the question, why do bad things happen and what happens when bad things happen? And he wrote, when I was a boy and I would see scary things on the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. You know, this is a great thing to say to kids in response to tragedies that happen that we cannot even comprehend. This is a good thing to think about here as an employee of this organization. Am I willing to be a helper when I witness or I overhear something happen that might have tragic or dire consequences for the person who's being harassed, because that's really what it's about. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to do, risk, in order to aid your colleague? What are you willing to do to protect the culture of this organization if there's zero tolerance here? If you are all uncompromising about the presence of sexual harassment? What are you willing to do to protect that commitment? Are you willing to fully invest in being the helper? This is a very personal matter, and this is an organizational commitment. Okay. So, any questions about that? In your packet, there's a quiz. I want you to get back in your groups. So these actually come from SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Managers website, which I'm sure you have a subscription to, right, Tommy?
Up for renewal, yes.
Okay. All right. Does HR need to investigate if an employee complains that a coworker texted offensive photos to their personal device outside of work hours?
False.
False. Companies can be held accountable for their workers' behavior regardless of where and when the potential harassment occurred, and whether the offensive content appeared on an employee's own phone or tablet. A hospital can be held liable for the inappropriate behavior of its patients.
Sure.
That's true. The hospital has an obligation to protect its employees from sexual harassment. The flip side of that, in one of those videos that we watched, That's Harassment, one of the videos very disturbingly and powerfully is about a violation, a harassment that occurs in a medical setting. And it reminds me a lot of a story that's in the news right now. Andrew Yang's wife came forth and reported being the victim of abuse during a gynecological exam. Have any of you been watching this? It's a really interesting story, because what's happened as a result of her coming out and speaking so vocally about it. Remember, I think he's dropped out of the race for president, Democratic Party. But his wife came forward recently and shared this story, and now a plethora of women have come forward with similar stories. And so that kind of scenario is played out in one of these films because of the pervasive nature of harassment and abuse that can occur in medical environments, mostly related to power. You know, this sense that because I'm working with the doctor, he or she can touch my body in the way that they feel necessary. In some cases, a friend of mine just wrote an article for Ms. Magazine on the prevalence of unnecessary pelvic exams and the violations that are occurring during pelvic exams, especially in women who are teenagers or actually beneath the age at which the medical community indicates one should have a pelvic exam. But doctors convincing their patients, oh, you need to have this pelvic exam, and in some cases putting them under that twilight experience, the anesthetic experience where they're not quite asleep and they're not quite awake, and violations occurring, and just really the pervasiveness of it being linked to the kind of trust that we automatically give our doctors over our own bodies. And he really makes a call in this article for always, in any circumstance, whether it's with a doctor you've been working with forever, your family doctor, or any other physician who's going to give you care, to make sure that your stance in reference to that person is one of partnership. That you're not going to tell me that I need to have a pelvic exam. You and I are going to come into partnership in making that decision. That's a very different way of communicating with your physician. And it's a very different orientation toward getting care. I digress. All right, this is a tough one. If an employee willingly extended a friend request to his or her supervisor or coworker on social media and becomes uncomfortable with the other person becoming too familiar, the worker should report it to HR. What did you say?
False.
False. Why false?
Because we've had this circumstance many times.
You what?
We've had this circumstance many times.
Tell me about that, because in the response, Shrum has said that they get phone calls about this all the time.
We had specifically one person who did it many times to many different people.
What did they do? Like,
They were just aggressive on social media.
so I willingly friend you, and then you become really aggressive. Okay, so what happened? Did the harassed bring it forth or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And how is it dealt with? How is that dealt with internally?
Well, they were working together in the same
Same
office.
Ah, okay.
So that's where the problem really extended in the workplace. It became a workplace issue then.
Yeah.
Even though it started outside the workplace or on social media.
So,
And then to the point where we actually had a discussion about it, and the conversation, the harassment became even more intense. You got other people involved, a mother or a daughter or all sorts of things.
ultimately, did that land in your office?
Who's that with?
Yeah, we all took this
That was before my
Yeah,
time.
that was Crystal.
Going back
That was Crystal.
10 years.
Have you seen this, though?
Not to that extent. I've seen where Facebook's got a little sticky, just from communicating, hashing out maybe an issue. I thought you were going to pick me up for a ride. Using it as just a mode of communication, not to that extent or anything your example.
Okay, yeah.
I do all of our orientations for all of our onboarding, and we talked about it a little bit in our group, but one thing that I mention is, me personally, if you request me on social media, I won't accept you unless we're at that level of comfort. So there's specific people that I'm friends with. And then I suggest the same thing to them. You know, don't accept people that you're uncomfortable with. If, you know, you have that level, just know that if something does fall on HR's lap, we have the right to investigate it if it becomes a workplace concern. So is that something we shouldn't be, you know, throwing out there?
No, I think that that's great, because even though it's, let's say, Facebook or any social media platform feels like it's outside of the workplace, and yet what's happening there is affecting my ability to do my job, or I'm coming into work the next day with this person who has just harassed me on Facebook, and it becomes then the hostile work environment.
So,
Now, yeah.
if you change the word from too familiar to too friendly, that changes your answer possibly.
Right.
But if you take it to a hostile work environment, what if they're bashing the employer? I think there's been a lot of litigation in that area, right?
I don't know. I can't speak to that. Is that true?
Well, there's a freedom of speech issue out there, and what you say outside of work and.
Oh, I see what you're saying. If I go home from work today and use social media platform to bash this company, that's a good question. What happens?
We're not at that level. Don't plant that seed. Don't even throw it out in the universe. Yeah.
I think it's protected.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
So the wording of too familiar, too friendly, too hostile.
Are you a lawyer?
No.
Plays one on television.
Inspiring.
But your questions really get at how tricky and sticky these issues can be. Have you ever had a situation where that happened?
Not that I know of. Yeah. I misread your question completely though. I thought, so I'm an employee, I friend somebody, and then I become too familiar, I become looking at their page.
Right.
Somehow that's my problem, their problem? I didn't get it.
Or it becomes uncomfortable for me.
But you're saying that they start to interact with you socially.
I think the
Like,
example
yeah.
I took it is if Joe asked me to be his friend, and then as I'm being his friend, I become too familiar with him. That's what this says.
Oh, yeah.
I think what Paige is saying is like private messaging, liking maybe inappropriate photos, late night likes at 4 a.m., like it's social media.
Hey, it looks like you're up.
Right, like staring at your pictures at 4 a.m. and liking 30 of them in a row, that kind of like strange stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you just unfriend them all?
Right.
Right.
Well, that's so.
And you could do what?
Block.
And you could do a plan.
Hey.
Told you.
Look at that. Bonus points
Boom.
for the deck over
Plan
here.
it. That's why we're here.
And I told him it was a true or false test.
We're almost out of time. Let me just see. I think the rest of these we covered. If you're interested in doing any of this with your teams, even a condensed version if you want to lead a small hour in this content, a really great conversation starter or discussion starter is to go to the SHRM website. In the search window, put in sexual harassment. It'll take you to their page, and that quiz is there, and there's free access to it. And you can take it with them, or have them take it independently and come in, and then the answers are there as well. Not only are the answers there, like if you took it yourself on the on the screen, and you press true or false, the right answer comes up with a very long explanation of why it's true or false. So it can create an opportunity to have some really interesting discussion about what is harassment and what isn't. I want to end with what zero tolerance looks like and feels like. And this is beyond harassment. This is harassment, this is discrimination of any sort. Zero tolerance means that we have zero tolerance for any communication and any behavior that leads anyone to feel unsafe, unsupported, and insecure about their role or position. Any communication that diminishes, demoralizes, or demeans another person. There's no place for that in this organization. Zero tolerance for any communication that bullies, belittles, or makes another person feel that they are beneath me. Any communication that is cruel, compromising, or threatening. Discrimination, zero tolerance for any communication or behavior that suppresses, it silences me, represses, it holds me back, regresses, sort of has me really, really turn inward. So I'm not even fully participating in this environment anymore. We have zero tolerance for that. We want zero tolerance for that. Pay very, very careful attention. We didn't really get to spend much time on this, but there is a term, I mentioned it. Be very, very careful about microaggressions. Let microaggressions be on your radar. This is in your packet, take this in. A microaggressions are brief, commonplace, daily, verbal, behavioral, environmental indignities, whether intentional or not, that communicate a hostile, derogatory, or negative racial, gender, sexual orientation, and religious slights and insults to the target person or group. This encompasses a lot. But these are called microaggressions because sometimes they pass. And sometimes the only person who hears and feels the impact of the microaggression is the person it was directed at, or the group for whom it was directed at. So microaggressions mostly come through in the words we speak, in the stories we tell, in the things that we joke about, in the things we complain about, in the things that we gossip about. They don't necessarily constitute harassment, but they are equally erosive, corrosive. They are equally damaging to the dignity of the individual to whom they're directed, and largely to this entire organizational culture. So you will remember those three things you really want to focus on. This idea that harassment, discrimination occurs in our communication. It is part of how we interact with each other relationally. So it's a communicative problem, it's a relational problem, and ultimately it becomes a workplace cultural problem. And its resolution, its management, is also reflected in changes we make in how we communicate, changes we make in how we relate, which ultimately creates more possibility for this organization, Sundance Vacation, to become ever stronger in its climate as a place that is safe, as a place where trust is privileged, as a way where people who work here can thrive here. All right. This is my closing slide. Sexual harassment does not live here. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate, we didn't look at the last video. The last video, if you're curious, that I was going to show is called The Actor. And the reason I chose it is because it's one of the set of videos that That's Harassment created that deals with exposure. And I was going to show it because I could not believe the prevalence of indecent exposure as being part of commonplace sexual harassment. It's hard to fathom. But if you're interested in those videos, they're really powerful. Again, it's #That's Harassment. I will see several of you in the morning for our sales training. Have a great night, and again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Your office